Kamaru Usman, Kenny, and I want you to let me have it here because, man, did the masses not like my tweet after this fight. So Kamaru Usman moves to 7-0, and I'm going to read you the tweet. He moves to 7-0 in the UFC in dominant fashion. And I was watching – I had it muted at times. I had Rogan's Fight Companion going a little bit at times. I was in bed with my wife, right? So I didn't hear his post-fight interview when he started talking about 30%. So I pushed out this tweet, and I just want your reaction. Still believe Kamaru Usman is ready to challenge the welterweight elite and has been for some time. In these spots against dangerous guys, you got to manage risk and prioritize the W. He did that tonight. Maybe that is being generous. I wasn't as offended by the performance as the masses. I feel like Emil Meek is dangerous and a little bit wild and even a threat off of his back. And I thought it was a good risk management fight for Kamaru Usman, who is trying to keep his name on a very short list of guys who are, closing in on a crack at Tyron Woodley. I don't know.
You know what, John? Just you reading that tweet really fucking pisses me off because it's disrespectful. It's inaccurate. No,
I know.
People love to get excited on Twitter, don't they? No. Listen, I think that's pretty accurate, man. And listen, I think this is a Kamaru Usman who didn't have his best performance in the world, but he did what he needed to do to win. And I thought that he used his wrestling skills like he needed to. I would have liked to seen more action on the ground. Obviously, I would have liked to seen a Kamaru Usman who typically likes to try to advance position and beat you up from there. He tried, but again, something was definitely up with Kamaru. This was not the normal Kamaru Usman that we've seen in the past several fights. But he got the win, man. And anytime you get the win in the UFC, that is huge. Now, this isn't going to help him performance-wise as far as maybe getting those bigger fights. But this is still a guy that is going to be very difficult to beat just based on his wrestling, his pressure, his conditioning. And Emil Meek is another guy who a lot of people were pretty high on as well. Right. I think he was a little too wild. Again, this was another case of a guy maybe going in there with a pretty basic game plan, didn't really have a great idea of what he wanted to do out there against Usman, who was getting pinned up against the cage, was allowing him to get pressured repeatedly. And Usman just took it to him, man. Did exactly what he needed to do. Grinded out another UFC win. And anytime you're going 7-0 in the UFC in a welterweight division that is always stacked year after year, it's an impressive win.
Emil Meek looks like a middleweight, man. I mean, it's amazing that guy makes
Lean
171.
Too.
So when Kamaru Usman says I was only at 30% in his post-fight interview, does that mean his training camp was only 30%? Does that mean he was dealing with an injury? It's hard to know exactly what he meant. Now, Tyron Woodley, Kenny, recently said he would fight Nate Diaz and delay his shoulder surgery, but maybe if he was going to fight a different guy like a Kamaru Usman or a Colby Covington, he would go under the knife, right? So I started thinking, maybe did Kamaru Usman believe that a little bit dinged up, not a great training camp, that he can still go out and beat Emil Meek on a night where he just isn't 100%? I mean, because you don't want to mess around in this sport if you're going in there injured. And I don't know if he said anything after the fact, but there's a lot of questions, after this win, obviously, given what he said after the fact.
Well, I don't pretend to know the backstory, but I would assume it would be something like that, where he was most likely injured, didn't have a great camp, wasn't able to spar as much as he would have liked to. And these things happen in the sport, right? There's certain injuries that you have where, you're not at 100%, but can you fight? Yes. And that's a situation that happens a lot during a fighter's career. You take those risks. Sometimes they pay off, sometimes they do not. This paid off for Kamaru Usman, and he probably felt that style-wise, and the way he matched up against his opponent, he knew he could still get the win. It probably wasn't going to be pretty, but he was going to be able to go out there and get it done. And that's what he did. It paid off for him. A lot of times, these paydays are very enticing. And financially you're under pressure, career-wise you're under pressure. He was out there, talking. He's been talking a lot lately to kind of hype himself up, and for him not to take this fight probably would have hurt him standing-wise. And he said, you know what, I'm going to take this fight. I can do what I need to do to get the win, and that's what he did. So,
Tough sport, though, man. You dominate your opponent, and a highly thought-of opponent at that. You're roundly booed after the fight because maybe you didn't take more chances or get the guy out of there. and then you start your post-fight interview by saying you were only at 30%. It's certainly not going to endear you to the masses. And it's crazy to think that a win like this, a dominant win over a credentialed guy, could be like a setback for Kamaru Usman. But if you pay attention to social media, it's almost like that's what the narrative is. So I would like to see Kamaru Usman fight Colby Covington. Covington, I think, is trying to get that next crack at Tyron Woodley, who, as we mentioned, is on the men. But to me, I mean, Usman Covington or Usman Till, those are the fights. And Darren Till's a guy who's going to bring it out of Kamaru Usman, right, Kenny? So,
I agree.
So I don't know if you have a preference, one of those two fights, but I got to think among those three, they're going to close the octagon door behind two of those guys next. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think Colby Covington makes sense just based on his style. You kind of cancel out those two wrestler-style fighters, and the better man wins.
All right, that brings us to Darren fucking Elkins, right? I mean, what else can you say about the damage? And you're laughing because of the tattoo. I didn't even mention the tattoo, and you're laughing because of the tattoo. He submits Michael Johnson here, and props to Michael Johnson, man, for looking outstanding and just attacking that weight cut, not having a slice of bread for 12 weeks. But this is a 5th loss in 6 starts for Michael Johnson. And we'll get to MJ in a second, but Darren Elkins, dude, I mean, the comeback king, you just can't get this guy out of there, man. And then obviously he's got the grappling skills and a lot of chokes in his repertoire. And Michael Johnson could take no more. He tapped out there in round number 2.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, what a reminder there for Michael Johnson as you're fighting a dude and you're just staring at the damage tattoo on the chest, being like, I am putting a lot of damage on this guy. He's still in front of me. This guy still wants to fight. What the hell is going on? And then you're just reminded by that disgusting tattoo on his chest. I love it, man. But Darren Elkins is an absolute savage, okay? He's a guy who could take a tremendous amount of pain and damage. Again, his ability to come back from adversity and eat those shots. And he was just clearly a guy who was not as fast as Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson, just as fast as they come, was landing a lot of shots. Elkins looked confused at one point, looked like he was hurt a couple times in that first round. But if you're not able to take out Darren Elkins early, get ready. Get ready for a 15-minute, 25-minute war, whatever it is. Darren Elkins has a way of adjusting, adapting, and once he got him on the ground, I said, "This fight's over. He's going to submit Michael Johnson." That's what he did. He went around to his back, and Michael Johnson just looked very frustrated. Man, it was a tough matchup for him. He was doing great early in the fight, wasn't able to put Darren Elkins away, and I don't know. It's one of those things where if you start too slow against Darren Elkins, you allow him to get back in the game. If you go too fast, you maybe risk getting tired later in the fight. I don't know if it was Michael Johnson necessarily getting tired. I think it was Darren Elkins hitting a beautiful takedown in that second round and just taking full advantage of it, not allowing Michael Johnson to get back up without tapping first.
After Darren Elkins came back to beat Mirsad Bektic last March in what was my upset of the year and one of the best comebacks in UFC history, I think Rogan walks into the octagon. He's like, all right, I'm here with one of the toughest human beings on the face of planet Earth, Darren Elkins, right? And he is every bit that. I wonder if there's any marketing angle with that damage tattoo, because whether the marketers and promoters like it or not, Darren Elkins is coming, Kenny. 6 straight wins in this featherweight division. We mentioned Jeremy Stephens, obviously, earlier. Those two have fought. I believe Stephens beat him on points. But this guy's won 6 in a row. Right? Darren Elkins getting a big fight next, man.
He's tough, dude. He's really
6
tough.
In a row at
it's
45
impressive.
for Darren Elkins.
But I really think that guy, that win over Mirsad Bektic, I think gave him a lot of confidence moving forward too. That's the kind of fight that's going to go, man, I can do anything. I could beat anybody.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, and I thought Michael Johnson, the way he approached the early portions of this fight was very much from a guy like I've been in here with Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? And now I'm in here with Darren Elkins, almost a little bit overconfident MJ, thinking at least I'm not sharing the cage with Khabib tonight. But, man, Darren Elkins, and I hesitate to call him an overachiever because then it's, oh, maybe he's not a great athlete or whatever else. But in modern day mixed martial arts, in this current climate at 145 pounds, for Darren Elkins, go to Team Alpha Male and reel off 6 consecutive wins. It's a huge story, and hopefully a lot of people are talking about Darren Elkins here after what he did over the weekend. Michael Johnson, Kenny, thought this would breathe new life into his career, moving down to 145 pounds. We like the way he attacked fight week, smiling on the scale, all good things. But, you know, the ledger reads L5 of 6. I mean, do you think that they cut bait with Michael Johnson? Maybe give him one more at 45, or what do you think?
You know, how crazy is this sport, though? I mean, you get a guy who was, one of the top fighters at 155 pounds, a guy who was beaten Edson Barbosa on the feet, by the way, and now, has a few losses in a row. This sport is just, it's so competitive, man. It's a completely different UFC than when I was competing. The level has increased tenfold. You get all these great fighters that are coming up, all these young killers. And for Michael Johnson, I don't think he is going to get cut. I don't think he should get cut at this point. There are a lot of great fighters out there, but I think Michael Johnson's one of those guys you can depend on, whether it's at 145 pounds or 155 pounds, who's going to go at you, who's going to try to make it exciting, who's going to try to knock your head off. So I think you got to give him another shot at least at 145 pounds. It looks like he made the weight well. He looked healthy. Started off that fight extremely well. So I think you should give him another shot at 145 pounds. Both those divisions are crazy competitive, but stay at 145 pounds. See if you can get another win.
And 20 months ago, he headlined against Dustin Poirier in Hidalgo, Texas, and knocked him out in the first round, right? This is a guy with a win over Tony Ferguson. And you took my point. I mean, I feel like there's value, right, on this roster of 500 or 600 fighters. I think he's a guy who has some name value, and he's going to bring it.
Yep.
You can headline him on FS1 in a lot of different places, 2 divisions, as you mentioned. So hopefully Michael Johnson can get at least one more in the UFC, which would certainly amount to a must-win, I would think, his next time out.